Great. Thanks very much, Sue. As Sue said, my name's Tim. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Digital Taxonomy. We are a company that makes smart tools for market research. And in particular, we've been looking at the process of coding open-ended text from surveys. We're interested in trying to make the process more efficient through automation. I'm going to talk to you today about some of the things we've learned along the way and where we think this is going in the future. And also, hopefully at the end, talk about some of the implications for the wider industry. And thankfully, I think the conclusions I'm making at the end tie in quite nicely with some of the other speakers from earlier on, so that's quite reassuring. So before I get into the specifics here, I'd just like to make sure we're all 100% clear about what we mean when we talk about coding. Now, I appreciate most of the people watching this will be very familiar with what coding is, but sometimes there can be a misunderstanding. So I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page here. For us, coding is the act of taking a verbatim response from open-ended questions in a survey and categorizing those responses so they can be analyzed. So in the example we can see here, we have a comment from a hotel survey, and we have a human coder in the middle who is ticking any of the items in the code frame that apply. And the desired result, as you can see, is a set of numbers that can be numerically analyzed and compared. Now, there are a few subtle aspects going on here that make this coding process actually quite unique. So firstly, the granularity required is usually very, very high. It's not enough just to say that the general theme of the response was, say, negative or positive. Standard text analytics can give you that level of granularity really easily. But most of the time, researchers need to dig into a greater level of detail than that. And secondly, the level of accuracy required is also very, very high. Collecting survey data is expensive, so researchers expect a high level of accuracy. There's no point spending loads of money on a survey if your coding gives you the wrong answer at the end. And lastly, we can see here, the task often requires coders to make judgment calls and what I call semantic leaps. So for example, it takes quite a bit of a semantic acrobatics to interpret the phrase noisy stag party and categorize that as problems with other residents. So there's usually a lot more going on here than meets the eye. So in spite of this challenge, we asked ourselves, is it possible to automate this process by replacing the coder with a machine? Can a machine simply take text in and give us the same numbers out that a human would? In trying to answer that question, our first instinct was to look for something off the shelf. There's a huge number of online services out there, and we weren't particularly interested in reinventing the wheel if we didn't have to. So we experimented with some promising looking services, and spoiler alert, we found them not really up to the job, and I'll try and illustrate why. As an example, we have a test survey where we ask people why they prefer to watch films at home. One person gave us the answer, because I'm poor. And we fed this into a semantic labeling service, who shall remain nameless, along with 3 possible candidate codes. The correct answer we're looking for here is obviously cheaper, but as you can see, the answer we got back was wrong in this case. The service also gives us back a confidence score, and as you can see from the numbers on the right there, it's not at all certain about any of the labels we gave it. And obviously in a real world context, you would have way more than 3 labels in a code frame. You could have hundreds. So it's perhaps not surprising that these sorts of services struggle with this sort of stuff, because in this case, there's quite a semantic leap required to get the right answer to translate because I'm poor into cheaper. And also these services are designed really to work with large blocks of data, typically analyzing documents and that kind of thing. So a tiny little verbatim like this doesn't really give the system enough to go on. So we found that these services, as they stand today, are just not really appropriate for what we're trying to do in the market research industry. The one caveat I'll add there is that although these aren't adequate currently, this is an area that is rapidly evolving, and who knows, in the years to come, the technology may advance to a point where just off the shelf, this sort of stuff gives us what we need. But certainly for now, that's not the case. So our next approach was to try and build rules to base the coding on. And the trap we discovered with this approach is that it sounds quite simple at the outset, but you can get yourself into hot water pretty quickly. Let me try and illustrate that. Here we have 4 completely different ways to say exactly the same thing. And if we were to try and build rules to automatically code these, we would end up with 4 completely separate rules, which starts to become really complicated and difficult to deal with. It's also really hard to avoid false positives and false negatives with a rules-based approach. So suppose someone says, I like popcorn, and we build a rule that says when the word popcorn appears, we code that as 1. But then what if somebody says, I don't like popcorn? Well, then you have to have another rule that says if the word popcorn appears in conjunction with the word don't, or something like that, then code that as 2. But what if they say, I don't like popcorn, I love it? Then you start to get into some very difficult areas trying to reliably construct rules that can code data in this way. So we felt a rules-based approach was inappropriate because it's complicated to set up and therefore quite difficult to maintain and not scalable. And we were looking for something that didn't require lots of setup and maintenance and fiddling, something that can work automatically out of the box. So that led us to turn to AI to look at machine learning approaches. What if a machine could learn how to do coding based on the coding done by humans? So we took this idea and we've constructed a system that learns by example. So as coders do their normal work and they code data, that data becomes training data for the AI, which makes the AI better at predicting how future verbatims should be coded. And as the AI learns, then it can assist coders where appropriate. So there are a couple of useful ways where we found that we've managed to get the AI to assist coders. So firstly, let's say a coder codes the verbatim. There are no distractions as code 18, along with a number of other similar examples. Then as new verbatims are fed into the system in the future, then the AI is able to apply its learning and auto-code these items as they come in. So these verbatims are therefore coded automatically, so instantly cut down on the amount of work the human coder has to do. And typically, these verbatims will be simpler in nature. So the AI is automatically handling items where the human, frankly, probably wasn't really adding much value in the first place. Beyond this, we find a certain class of verbatim where the AI will have some good suggestions, but it's not confident enough to apply auto-coding. So here we see the suggestions are presented to the coder to guide them quickly through the coding. And this speeds up the process because the coder just needs to quickly verify and approve the AI suggestions given to them. And personally, I think this is a great illustration of how AI is likely to be used to complement humans rather than completely replace them. These are smart tools that can help us do more rather than take over from us. But there are limitations to these smart tools, and we always find a certain set of verbatims where the AI just cannot help. Perhaps the verbatim's very long, or it's badly written, or just contains something that the AI just doesn't know about. And in these instances, we need humans to code in the traditional way as a fallback. We need a human to read, interpret, and apply judgment to get it right. So here, the AI steps aside, and the human ends up handling only those items where they can really add value. So taking all this together, we found from our experiments that, crudely speaking, a given set of verbatims will divide into these 3 categories in thirds, roughly speaking. So a third can be auto-coded, a third can be coded with assistance from the AI, and a third will fall into the difficult category and have to be done manually. And together, all of this adds up to a significant improvement in efficiency. Typically, we've seen that coders can be around 2.5 times faster than a purely manual coding approach. So as it stands, rather than seeing the AI as something that replaces humans, we see it as something that is working in partnership with people. And I think that echoes some of the comments that were made earlier. It's a smart set of tools to augment what people do, tools designed for specific purposes, designed to help people be more effective, but not ready to completely take over yet. So let's just draw a picture of where things are and where they may be going. Here we're trying to represent the current trade-off between precision and automation. In the top left-hand corner, we have text analytics, which is highly automated, but the level of precision is generally fairly coarse. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have our traditional manual coding, which is very precise, but nowhere near automated. So we think what we've managed to do with our AI-assisted coding is to move that manual coding towards the automated end of that scale. Over the coming years, we will definitely see improvements in algorithms and computers, and we will improve the AI with increasing amounts of training data. And this will definitely move coding further towards the top and improve the levels of automation that are possible. But personally, I don't think it will ever be possible to get to 100% AI-based coding right at the top there, just because of the nature of the challenge I mentioned at the start. However, regardless of how far we manage to move towards the top, one thing is certain, certainly in my mind at least, coders and the coding process is going to become a lot more efficient through automation. So if coders are simply able to get more done in less time, what does that mean for the industry as a whole? Well, one school of thought might be that we just simply do the same amount of coding that we do currently, just with less manpower and therefore less cost. However, I think there's another way of looking at this, and that's to think of value going up as opposed to costs coming down. If we free coders to focus on the work where they add the most value, overall we increase the value of coding and therefore increase the value and viability of open-ended responses generally. This is a pattern we've seen before in plenty of other industries. Automation brings new and better ways of doing things, so we end up doing more of it in better and more effective ways. So, for example, there was a time when a spreadsheet was literally a physical piece of paper filled out by hand by accounting clerks. With the introduction of the computer spreadsheet, this type of work has disappeared. But in the process, the value of accounting has increased relative to the cost, leading to growth and innovation and therefore more accounting jobs overall, not less. So too with coding in market research, the use of AI has the potential to bring more value and therefore growth for the industry as a whole. It offers the opportunity to do new and innovative things. Perhaps we can ask different types of open-ended questions. Perhaps we can make surveys more conversational. Perhaps new types of analysis will evolve and so on. But it's likely the role of the coder will change. The focus of the role is likely to become less mechanical and more about working with the tools, applying human judgment, guidance, and creativity. So rather than using AI to enable a race to the bottom, purely to drive down prices, we want to see computers doing what they're good at and to free humans to do more of what they're best at. With that, I'd like to say if you want to know more, feel free to get in touch with us, either via the email addresses here or via our website. I've deliberately kept this fairly technically light, but obviously if you're interested to know more about the technical details behind all of that, feel free to get in touch with us. We always enjoy talking about that kind of thing. So yeah, with that, I'll ask, are there any questions?